You might not think of yourself as a leader. You might even say, I'm just here to do my job. But in the world of healthcare, leadership isn't a title you earn, it's a role you step into whether you realise it or not. In this episode of You Are Not a Frog, I'm joined by Dr. Paul O'Dwyer. He's a dental surgeon and leadership expert. And we're asking a deceptively simple question. Are you really not a leader? Because here's the thing, if people look to you for answers, if you influence how your team works, if you shape the experience your patients have, if you supervise anyone in any way, then guess what? You're already leading. In this conversation, we explore why so many healthcare professionals miss the leadership roles they're already playing, and how a few small shifts in mindset and a few small increases in skills can make a big difference. We'll cover why leadership starts with listening, what to do if you just feel too busy to lead, and we also talk about how knowing your personal mission can transform the way you show up at work. So whether you're a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, or any kind of senior healthcare professional or clinical leader, this episode's for you, as long as you're ready to stop hiding in plain sight and start owning your impact. So grab a cuppa or pop on your headphones for your next walk, and let's discover the hidden leader inside of you.
I'm Paul O'Dwyer. I'm a dentist, graduated at University College Cork, 1997. I'm currently working clinically in oral surgery, but also lecture at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and I'm group clinical advisor with Portman Dentics here in Ireland.
It's wonderful to have you on the podcast, Paul. Thanks so much for coming. You've got a really wide portfolio of things. What would you say is your main interest right now?
That's an excellent question. I'm juggling many balls, like everybody listening to this podcast. I'm currently midway / three-quarters way through my PhD, which is looking at nonverbal communication between patients in the dental surgery and dentists. That's kind of my main focus at the moment, and I say that for the benefit of my supervisor who may be listening.
Get it in there, yes. Always get the PhD. And I'm already thinking nonverbal communication. How do patients communicate verbally when they've got their mouths open and people got instruments in them anyway?
Hey, Rachel, you have hit the nail on the head,
Okay.
because that's exactly right. That's what we're looking at. And how do we get around that? And it feeds into consent. It also feeds into patient dignity and things like that we listen to so regularly on your podcast.
And I know you've also got a really big interest in leadership within practices and departments, clinical leadership.
So the leadership thing is interesting. And again, I hear this quite regularly in your podcast too. A number of years ago, I finished a master's degree in healthcare management. And one of the things that struck me, I had just taken over a role as a group clinical director with one of the larger dental corporates here in Ireland. And I'm sure, like many of the clinicians listening across all healthcare aspects, we tend to get trained really, really well clinically, which is terrific. But that leadership component is missing. And as I was exiting the healthcare management master's degree, one of the faculty staff at Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland was developing a brand new program called the Professional Diploma in Clinical Leadership. And this is a short 9-month course which looks at elements of how you link clinical tasks with the actual roots of leadership. So vision, mission, all of the fun things that we learn about. So I was brought in to develop, and I still do. I deliver out on module 3, which is organizational structure and writing proposals for leadership.
This podcast is about helping doctors, dentists, other busy healthcare professions beat burnout and work happier. So why would we be talking about leadership?
So we often find ourselves, and this is something I've said to the undergraduate medical students particularly, because you can imagine these are boys and girls of 18, 19 years of age. Their minds are filled with pathology and biochemistry and anatomy and things like that. So when we come to talk about leadership, you almost see the blinds being drawn down across their eyes. But the reality is, for all of us in any healthcare position, there is a leadership responsibility behind that. So you might say, well, I'm going to be finishing up now. I'm going to be a nurse practice manager in a general practice, or I'm going to be a general practitioner in beautiful North Tipperary, or I'm going to be a consultant in vascular surgery. Any of those roles has inherently a leadership position. You're going to be managing and leading yourself. You're going to be managing and leading the people who work with you. And importantly, of course, you're going to be leading and managing your patient. So even if you don't see directly the value behind formal leadership, there is a need for it. And the example I always give is sometimes, and I'm 104 years of age, as you can tell, but when I was training, I finished in
You're only
1990.
a year older than me, I think, Paul.
Oh,
So
no, 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 no.
let's just.
So 21 apiece, I like it. So what I would say is when we were finishing clinically, I finished in 1997, this was never spoken of. And there is that inherent kind of legacy issue within organizations, particularly in our National Health Service here in the HSC, and indeed privately as well, where you pick it up as you go along. That famous phrase, "Whoa, you'll pick it up as you go along." To which I always respond and say, well, listen, imagine if you've been a passenger in a car and you're watching your father or mother drive the car, and then suddenly they stop the car, open the door and say, now, you've seen me do this for long enough. Off you go.
You'll pick it up as you go along.
You pick it up as you go along. So there has been a need established. I think we've all agreed that leadership is there. And we can see this in the clinical leadership framework that the NHS has as a tool that we use on the program. And I think it's really important. So it's showing you both the theory and the practice behind it.
Yeah, how does it, I'd love to hear how it affects others in the team, and I'm sure we'll be moving on to that. But how does it affect you if you're not taking your own leadership seriously? What issues does it cause for you as the leader who's not acknowledging that you are a leader?
Yeah, I think that's really important. So sometimes, and again, Rachel, this is something you've touched on your podcast before, we tend to be very much, our training tends to be very personalized. So we are the problem solver. Very much of what we do is solving problems. And indeed, recently on one of your podcasts with Kathy DeMarcos, you talked a lot about identity. And we seem to be the people for whom the buck stops here. And if we take that responsibility on wholeheartedly, it can lead to burnout, and we can burn ourselves out. Indicators around that will be micromanaging, taking on tasks too much. And I'll wear my dental hat for just a second. So if you can imagine you're a patient coming in, I might be someone who I'm reliant on my nursing colleagues and my receptionist colleagues and my waste management colleagues and my health and safety colleagues to provide the ability to me to do my job. If I don't understand that I'm leading within that team, that causes problems, because suddenly it becomes my responsibility to make sure the patients are booked in, that cross-infection control is followed to the letter of the law, that my gloves are there, and so on and so forth. So it shows itself that this lack of appreciation of leadership can show itself in a very simple example like that, where you're doing too much. You have a very specific role, you have a very specific task, and it's leaning on others to help you to do that, but also providing the leadership behind it. Understanding your role. Again, I'll echo Kathy DeMarcos here when we talk about identity. It's what we do. It's not defining who we are, but it's what we do.
I'd never thought of it like that. That's really interesting, because I do think of people that I know that will go around going, oh, I'm not a leader, I'm just here to do the work. But they're consultants or they're GP partners. And yeah, they are the people who are taking a lot on themselves because they've never taken that leadership role seriously. You're right. So they're not then able to delegate effectively and make sure that the tasks that they need doing, and they do end up burnt out. So what you're saying is actually, if you really take yourself seriously as a leader and think, actually, this is part of my professional responsibility, how I'm trusting other people, first of all, giving them tasks, but then trusting that they're going to do them, that is part of the leadership skills that I need to develop.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I know many people listen to this podcast because they're in a patient-facing role. If we think about it, just flip it slightly. So when a patient chooses, and obviously dentistry is mainly elective, so patients are choosing to see us rather than going to accident emergency or whatever the case may be. There was a very interesting paper a couple of years back by Campbell and Tickle, which looked at the reasons why patients choose to attend a specific dentist. And I read this with interest because I was thinking, is it a price point thing, or, is it access, whatever? The number one thing is trust. Trust, access, and then finance, in that order. It was quite interesting. So if we think about how a patient views us, and this goes across all disciplines, medicine, dentistry, surgery, you name it, they're putting their trust in us to do the job right. By the same token, we as clinical leaders within our own sphere, we're putting our trust in our teams to work with us. And for that to happen, to take my driving analogy again, let's get the lessons done. Let's reverse around the corner. Let's do the 3-point turn, parallel park, and understand how that works. There is theory behind it. There are concepts behind it. Everyone listening, I'm sure, to this podcast has had a scientific training and background. And one of the first questions that we will always ask about any course of action is, why. So why should I, be a leader? Why should I be aware of these concepts? Why should I? And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's lending that support to you, helping to guide your team, providing best patient outcomes. All of that's it's becoming more and more apparent.
Yeah, well, when you put it like that, like better patient outcomes, helps you work better team, all that sort of thing. What else have you seen happen apart from micromanaging if people aren't seeing themselves as leaders?
I think that's a good question. I think frustration is the big one, because oftentimes, and I'm thinking particularly of medical and dental colleagues here, who our career pathways tend to be quite linear. So we finish second level, we go into third level, we get our degrees, usually do very well, all that jazz, move on to our next job, and it's like building like Lego blocks all the way through. We never really stop to think about all of the skills and stuff that we need there. So it can be very frustrating. A lot of the tasks fall to us. We are the problem solvers, is the term I often use. And so when we don't think everybody else is up to speed, that can be very frustrating. The other thing as well in relation to frustration is we're not if you like, the all problem solvers. So I am reliant on the electricity company to make sure the light is on. I am reliant on the water to come through the door, through the pipe to get to my surgery, and so on and so forth. So it can be quite frustrating to understand that we need to have relationships with everybody around us who support us in everything that we do. And so that level of frustration can then show itself in burnout, absenteeism, taking time off, all of those things that feed into issues with regard to ignoring that leadership thing.
So you're going to get frustrated with these things that you, like aren't under your control. And it's interesting you say that, because actually one of the most powerful shapes that we teach is the zone of power, which is all about what's in your control, what's not in your control. And we tend to start all our sessions out like that, whether whether we're doing an away day with a practice team, or whether we're with a group of, say, trainers. Like, what's in your control, what's out your control. It's amazing what trainers feel really responsible for with their trainees when they can't possibly be responsible for it, because they're not in their control. The trainees' health, their well-being, how their kids are getting on. It's just like, that's not in your zone of power. And that, for me, that, that's a really fundamental leadership thing that we need to understand. But if you're not seeing it as a leader, you're going, well, I don't really need those leadership skills, I'm not going to develop that. And then it has all these knock-on effects that we don't think of. And I'd not really thought of that in the terms of the patient sense before either.
And, I'll give you one example, which I think your listeners might enjoy. We now deliver this course online, face-to-face, using X2O and Blackboard Collaborate and interesting things, and it's really good. But when we started it off in 2017, we did face-to-face. So a lot of GPs actually came to it initially from beautiful places like County Kerry and Tipperary and places like that, and they'd come to the lecture theatre at Sandyford, and they'd all walk in the door and walk out the door. It was great fun. Really enjoyed, really engaged, and open to I could see a lot of light bulbs going off. But one of the fun things about it was understanding, as I've just mentioned, how everybody plays a role within what you do. So one of the questions I often ask is, and this is a good one, where I say, some people ask me and say, who is the most powerful person in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, right? And everybody's expecting me to say the president or the registrar or the program director or whoever, the module lead. And I always look at my watch and say, it depends on the time of day, right? All right. And they say, well, what do you mean by that? So I said, 8:30 in the morning, and it's tumbling rain, and I've forgot my swipe card. John behind the desk. He is the most important and powerful person in the Royal College of Surgeons, because he's going to let me in. And I preface that by saying, does anybody here know the name of the man at the desk as they walk through the door? So these are the future leaders of our profession, filing by, walking through, and very few have stopped to say, hello, how are you? My name is, and what's your name, and how long have you been here, and thank you for your support, and making sure everything's all set to go. And I think that's a really powerful lesson. It's visualizing, being aware of people around you and how much they're part of your team, directly or indirectly.
I think one of the big problems with people not seeing themselves as leadership is people think, oh, I'm not a leader. I'm too humble. It's big-headed to say that I'm a leader. Therefore, I'm just going to, because I'm not really a leader, I'm just going to keep my head down and do my work. Why have we got this idea that it's big-headed to think of yourself as a leader and get the skills that you need when you might not be?
Yes, that's a really good question. And again, it's funny, the undergraduate medical crew, particularly because they're 18, 19, and exactly as you say, at that very early stage, I call it the larval stage of being a doctor, they're kind of say, well, no, hang on a second, I'm not a leader. I'm just going to be a doctor. That's all I'm going to be. And I say, well, hang on a second. Within this room, you are, yes, one of maybe 60 candidates who will be a doctor in a few years to come. But remember how you're seen by other people. When you step out of this room, when you leave this building and leave this place in 5 or 6 years' time, within your community, you're seen as a leader. And the majority of people who will cross your path, when you introduce yourself, part of what you do and part of identity, as Kathy said in the last podcast, is around what you do. It isn't necessarily who you are, and I'm keen to stress that, but it is part of what you do. And so people will see you and say, well, they've trained at university, they've done this, that, and the other, so therefore they must be a leader. And if you fail to recognize that, or if you fail to embrace it, you're not just doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing a disservice to the people that you're treating and also the people that you're working with, because all eyes will be on you.
It's a sort of weird false humility, isn't it, really?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I say in the lectures that I give is I say, if you think you're not a leader, too late. You signed up for it already, whether you realize it or not.
Well, I think so. Any healthcare professional, whichever branch of healthcare you're in, whatever your role is, as soon as you've been there more than a year or something like that, you're a leader, because there's always people coming up behind you, more junior, that you are supervising. That even if you've been there for ages and ages and ages and you feel that your role is sort of very minor, you've still got all that experience, and people will be coming to you and asking. So you just can't get away from it, can you?
And I think as well, Rachel, one of the things I'm always keen to stress is that sometimes we get, and that word about being in a silo and that we don't talk to each other, and that this can happen across all healthcare disciplines. But there was, I do a human factors thing in the diploma in clinical leadership as well, and we talk about, being efficient around delivery and things like that. So I'm always keen to learn from as many wide variety spaces as I can. And I think you might be familiar with this, but a number of years ago, and going back well over a decade, Greater Ormond Street, the paediatric service there, they looked at the movement of child patients from theatre to recovery. And I'm not a paediatrician and I'm certainly not medically qualified, but I do understand the urgency behind that time frame between getting the patient from the table to the high dependency unit. And various consultants and people who were there, and there's a massive team, as you can imagine, around some of the more complicated surgeries, they decided to say, well, who does these time lapses really, really well? So they brought in F1 McLaren. So Formula One McLaren team came in, and they were there for, I understand from the paper, about 7 to 10 days, and they examined the roles of everyone around them. They looked at where the leadership was coming from. They looked at the coordination. They looked at the team management. And based on their findings, and this is just purely from a logistical viewpoint, they implemented a lot of the significant changes in role responsibility, task management, etc., based on them.
I've just got this image in my head of like the changing the wheels on the incubators and stuff like that. Be fascinated to hear about what they actually found. It's interesting. What else? How else does this affect other people if you're not seeing yourself as a leader? Because I'm just thinking, I was doing some work with a GP partnership team recently, and there was one particular person who was very much, I'm just a lowly partner. I'm only very part-time, and I don't really, I just keep my head down and I just see the patients, and, all this leadership, like, it's not really for me. And I knew from having spoken to a couple of the other partners that actually this was a real problem for everybody in the practice, because staff were coming to this person who was just like abdicating all responsibility of this, I'm just a lowly partner type thing. And it really was affecting the whole of the practice team, that this person wasn't identifying themselves as part of the leadership, even though they always sat in on all the leadership meetings and all that sort of stuff.
I think, yeah. So if we take it back, and one of the key, and that's a really good point actually as well. I say to particularly the people I work with, I always ask the question, if I'm heading into a new team, or if I sometimes do observations around teams, I'll ask them all about themselves, and then I'll ask them, what exactly is your role and responsibility? And from that, I'm getting not just what they believe it is, but also what it is they do. And they can be two very different things. So one of the cost proposals that I do in the Diploma in Clinical Leadership is to talk about how we put a healthcare change or quality improvement in place. And the one area that they all struggle with is costing, because most clinicians haven't a notion, absolute notion. Some of them will do a bit of research and say, well, this equipment costs this and this service costs that, and etc. So rather than get into the nitty gritty, I just ask one very simple question, and I think you'll enjoy this story. So one of the part of my role and responsibilities within corporate dentistry is interviewing new dentists for positions. And these are competency-based interviews, and I'm sure your listeners will have heard of these before, where you ask them, you give them a set of clinical tasks, and you ask them what they do, etc. But one of my last questions, and if anybody's ever gone for an interview, this is a spoiler alert, is to say, and you'll laugh at this, how much is a box of gloves? All right. So you say, okay. So I have 60 candidates in my diploma in clinical leadership, and the prices vary wildly from £1 or 99 cents, if you want to do euros or sterling, all the way up to like £20 a box. And I say, whoa, hang on a second
So
here.
I'm saying €10.
Okay, I wouldn't be shopping with you now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Or how many gloves?
yeah, it's a box about 50 pairs, 100 pairs, depending. So all the big suppliers are coming at around €4.99, so about maybe £5 or £6 roughly. Again, depending on the quality and the style, and powdered and latex, and there's all other variables as well. But the reason I give that example is it shows me not just that they're price savvy or pound foolish or whatever the case may be, but it's just their appreciation for it. How this links with your question is very simple. If you don't know the cost of things, then you're going to run out very quickly in this case, gloves, okay? Because you won't have ordered in time. You won't have observed what's going on. If your role is, inverted commas, I just look after the gloves, you are actually an incredibly powerful and important part of the cog that turns the whole wheel. So if you feel that you're somehow exempt from being part of a management team, being part of a leadership team, remember that. So if I reach for the box of gloves and there are no gloves left, and that's because we overspent our budget because we didn't know the price. This is chicken and the egg stuff here going on. That's a very powerful example of understanding that no matter what role you have, no matter what position you occupy, no matter what your task or responsibility is, there's a reason for your role. Healthcare does not suffer supercilious or superfluous people in roles at all, as you well know.
Can I just ask you something there, Paul? Because I think in the NHS, healthcare perhaps does suffer some supercilious people, because I think there are, when costs aren't directly borne by that direct leadership team, then people do get away with not doing their role properly. And they get away. In fact, the amount of people I have heard about, the amount of absolutely dreadful managers I've heard about in hospital trusts nearby who, and I quote from someone, someone told me, we've got the worst manager at the moment, but don't worry, they're being promoted out into a different department soon. So their leaders just get promoted out. And one of the big issues I'm seeing in teams that there are people that aren't doing their jobs, aren't doing their roles, but nobody's challenging them. And maybe that's because this person not fulfilling their role isn't directly causing a financial problem to that team that they're all suffering from instantly, but they are causing other problems that everybody's focusing on. There's nothing like finances to focus their mind, but other stuff goes on, like people are leaving because this person's so awful and people aren't taking that seriously.
Yeah, and you know what? You've exactly encapsulated the conversation that I tend to have with people. So I'll highlight that through the glove example as well. So many people listening to this will have worked in hospital environments or in general practice where gloves are the bread and butter of what we do. I can't see a patient without gloves. Okay, so a management person comes in, let's say a fictitious organization, right? Be it national healthcare or otherwise, and they look at the balance sheet and they're told, our budget has to be cut. So they look through each line of item. They say, well, we can't cut salaries because that would cause a trade union issue. We can't really negotiate with our utility crew because they've already given us the best deal. So what can we look at? And they often, the magic roulette ball lands on gloves, right? And I'm sure if anybody here listening to this, I see a lot of nodding digital heads when I say this. They'll say suddenly the gloves changed. And we put them on and they tore right down the middle. And I ended up having to get to my third pair before it actually worked. So what has happened, exactly as you said, is that someone who has been in a non-clinical position, who has never had to wear gloves before, has never used them to treat a patient, is making the decision to cross off that line, produce a cheaper on cost level. Looks really great, you're saving money, but when it comes to value, I now, as the clinician using them, I'm using 3 times more pairs of gloves. So even though there might have been a 33% cheaper thing, it's actually cost more. My clinical waste is increased because it's now uncontaminated goods, and the knock-on domino effect is remarkable. And this goes back to the leadership thing as well, in that up to relatively recently, and by recently I mean the last 10, 20 years, we have tended to trust professional business people to run health services, be it privately or publicly. And in some respects, that makes really good sense. However, there is now the school of thought, which I would agree with, is that you get clinicians with that business savvy, with that roles and responsibility, with that leadership component in, because they know that simple example of having the right gloves, the right place, the right time, that does the job, rather than the cheaper ones that break in the middle.
Yeah, you always need people, don't you, that are actually using the services that people are changing to be able to do that. Yeah, and I guess it's not so tangible, but it's just as important around the people management skills, around the supervising teams, around just how people interact. That partner that I was talking about that didn't see themselves as a leader and was very passive. People are still watching what they did, whether they identify as a leader or not, and they're still being, they're still following them. And even if they step right back and say, well, I'm not really part of it, they are representing what the leadership is standing for. What should people do? So I'm thinking of if someone's listening to this now, Paul, and they are thinking to themselves, oh, crumbs, okay, well, yeah, I don't see myself as a leader, but I guess from everything you've said, I probably am. Where should they start? Because, there's a million different leadership courses. They're great. And, if you want to go on a leadership course, great. And I don't think you should wait until you've got your official leadership title to do that. And I think you learn all sorts on leadership courses that don't just help you lead, they just help in life. I mean, one of the best leadership courses I ever did, bizarrely, was learning to coach. Interestingly, my coaching course taught me huge amounts about being a leader. Okay, but I know you've also contributed recently to a book on emotional intelligence, and I think this is probably where you need to start. Would you say that?
I would agree with that too. Yeah, I think, and thank you. Yes. So there's a brand new book called Emotional Intelligence in Dentistry. It's a kind of a pioneering book. My colleague, Dr. Mary Collins here at the Royal College of Surgeons, she is the main editor, and she got a lot of dental colleagues, including myself, to contribute to it. I think if someone is thinking about leadership in general, first of all, as you say, there is a plethora of books out there that they can access. I'd say do your own research first of all, and look at what fits for you. The second thing is look at the role that you're in, because I'm conscious I'm speaking to many different healthcare professionals here. Look at the role you're in. Also look at if your line manager or your direct boss has done some leadership training, maybe talk with them first and say what fits best for you. Not all leadership courses, or indeed diplomas or degrees or whatever, will fit exactly what you want. You will definitely learn something, obviously. That's the first thing. The second thing is read. I know we don't have time to do that, but read is always a good thing. And start small. I mean, when it comes to leadership in general, I mean, one of the fun books I always like to mention is the one called Make Your Bed. I don't know if you've ever heard that one before.
No, but I might get that for my teenagers.
Yeah, but well, hey, you're on my team. I've got 4 girls, so I'm on your team there. McRaven, retired Navy SEAL, and it kind of encapsulates that famous one, which I'm a huge fan of as well, which is celebrate the small wins. And he was looking at motivating his SEAL team and all that kind of jazz. And he said, one of the big things you can do in the morning is when you get out of bed is to make your bed, so it's absolutely made, ready to go. And it does 2 things. One, it's accomplished a task really early on in the morning. And second of all, when the day is over and you're absolutely exhausted, you're getting into a freshly made bed. And it's a really good start. It's a fun look at, and it's serious leadership stuff in it too, but it really struck a chord with me, and it's one that I often recommend. So Make Your Bed by McRaven. And it's a bestseller. So to answer your question, I think that's the first thing to do. I think then if you are thinking about a more, structured approach, take a look at the colleges. Obviously here in Ireland, we do an online digital blend thing for diploma in clinical leadership, which has been very successful. There are other courses out there too. But I think it's finding the course that best suits your role and responsibility. And on that point as well, by the way, and you mentioned this earlier on when you talk about, people say, oh, I'm not really ready for this, or this isn't something I do. I have often asked people about, when's the last time you looked at your organization's mission? What do they do? So, mission, vision, and values. And I know these are kind of, some people bandy these words around. They say, oh, this, that, and the other. And I often say, well, look, if I'm going to do a piece of work for somebody, I need to understand what's their goal, right? So, because it gives me an insight into what their leadership is. If they're leading their team towards a particular area or goal, I need to understand what's their modus operandi. How do they work? What's driving them to do that? Have a look at your organization and say, what is it that their mission is? And then how does my own personal leadership fit within that? So, for example, if we look at RCSI, its mission is to recognize and develop leadership and indeed innovation. And if we look at their values, it's things like respect, collaboration, scholarship, and innovation, RCSI.
I love those books that you're recommending. I would hit on it from a slightly different angle, interesting. So you're looking at like organizational mission and things like that. I guess I would look on it from I guess the personal skills angle. So the personal skills books, I also love the one that's affected me the most is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which is all about the drama triangle. If you're a fan of the drama triangle, stop rescuing people, get out of victim and stuff, it's all about what as leaders, how we keep ourselves in victim or other people in victim, and how we get what they're called above the line and be conscious of what we're doing rather than just like being sort of bashed around like a ship in a storm. And that's been really, really helpful for me. So that's one I absolutely love. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think, is Stephen Covey. I mean, it's a classic one, isn't it? Quite a long book, but it's really, really good. And I was just thinking, Paul, when you were talking about finding out your mission, I was thinking, right, how many GP surgeries actually know what their mission are, and how many consultant surgical departments know what their mission is, apart from, to have really good outcomes and keep people safe. But I really like the concept of the Stevens question, which we used for a time, which is based on, there was a rowing coach in Cambridge, and he would set a question whenever they wanted to either get a new boat or try a different training regime or get new kit. The one question he asked was, will it make the boat go faster? And I think there's a whole book written on that, isn't there? And this question of what's our one thing that we're trying to work out now. And in fact, legend has it, and I think this is true, that when the Olympic 8 went to Sydney in 2000 and something or other, and they won the gold, but they didn't attend the Olympic opening ceremony because they asked themselves the question, will this make the boat go faster? And it wouldn't, so they didn't do it. And I think for GP practices, for example, and we talk about this a lot in our Shapes Academy, it might be, will this help us work safely and feel better? Or, will this decision help us retain our staff? Or will this decision help us keep the practice open or improve our access, or whatever it is? But this one thing that you're leading to, and something that's sometimes, if you don't have this overarching vision, just working out what your Stevens question is for the season can be quite helpful. Do you use stuff like that as well?
I do actually. And I give you one classic example from a practical point of view. So I spent over 10 years in a beautiful town just very close to where I am here in general practice. So I was, as I call it, drilling, filling and billing. But what I used to do was I used to work late on a Monday evening until 8 p.m. And then I would take a half day on Tuesday. And the reason was that it balanced each other out. It was a really good thing to do, actually, to have some time off in the middle of the week. So, working, banking, all that kind of stuff, and shopping. So the town where I was working, this is a number of years ago, is a very much old school Middle Ireland, very picturesque place, but very much stuck in history. And so I had a very small sign on my window, which would have my opening hours, and I had, Tuesday afternoon closed, and that's so on and so forth. So I was there about 5 years, and I happened to be there on a Tuesday afternoon doing paperwork, which I hate doing like everybody else. And there was a knock on the door. So I opened the door, and there was this wonderfully friendly farmer in his late 70s. And Tuesday afternoon was the day when most of the farming community came in to buy their supplies, because there was a sale on in the hardware store. And he said to me, every time, how long are you here? I said, I'm here 5 years. Every time I'm in here, you're closed. It's terrible. Are you ever open at all? And I said, when do you come to town? Tuesday afternoon. He never read the sign. He never read the sign. It was gone. In relation to how leadership works there, I then said, okay, right. So I think I'm great and I have a really good staff, good surgery. And I think I've got everything all sorted out. But in actual fact, my signs need to be bigger about what I do. And this is the reason for it. And then we made an appointment and I said, you'll have to just change your rota slightly to come in to see me. But it's that idea in his mind, 100% of the time that he came to town, I was shut. And so if anybody asked him, is that guy open? Oh, he's never open. I've never seen him open there. Whereas in actual fact, I've been exhausted from Monday night at 8 o'clock. One of the things I was over at the American Dental Association's conference. It was in New Orleans last year. It was gorgeous. 16,000 dentists in one place. Best place to have a toothache. And I looked at some of the marketing, and the Americans are great at marketing and stuff. But I saw one thing that really struck me, and I thought that was really good. Because as a practitioner, and particularly as a self-employed private practitioner, I'm obviously constantly aware of cost and what's involved. So when you give your patient their receipt for your treatment that they've had done, you may have just that one line that said examination and the fee. It might be €50, €60, €70, whatever the case may be. And that's all it says. And so the patient in their own mind is leaving the building thinking, I just gave that guy €60 for sitting in a chair for 5 minutes for him to say, I need this, that, and the other done. And one of the American crew that was there, they had an itemized receipt and it says examination and the fee was the same. But underneath was sterilization, cross-infection control, use of gloves, rent, light, heat, salary for nurse, IT, insurance, GDPR. And he had a whole list itemized right down to the last cent of what that made the €60. So it was no longer the €60 going into my trouser pocket, but in actual fact, to feed the beast that is general practice, as everybody will know.
Oh, totally, totally. And we just don't tell people what we do, and therefore then it's not valued by the patients. Absolutely. It's the problem in the NHS when they're not getting the bills. Someone's getting the bills, but the patient isn't directly. That's really hard. It just reminds me, a really good friend of mine is going through chemo at the moment and was sent for an investigation. Now, she didn't know what it was for. And I looked, when she told me, I said, well, it sounds like it's a routine thing that they would do halfway through, just to make sure that the chemo isn't affecting this particular bit of the body. But no one had really said to her. They just said, turn up in this ward at this time for this investigation. And she went, and it was just a routine thing. But even just having this is why you're doing it. And actually, this is what we do. And this shows us this. And there are sort of leaflets that come out, but it's not sort of written around, even in a physio department. This is what physios are for. This is what we do. This is all the training that we have. This is a thing I think would be really helpful. But what skills do people need? If, we can do leadership courses and learn about leadership and all that sort of stuff. But actually, if you're talking about the 3 top emotional intelligence skills, so these are all the brackets, soft skills. I don't think they're soft at all, but to be a leader, if you had to assess, if you could only assess 3 things when you were choosing your next deputy, what would you be looking for in somebody?
Number 1 skill, listener. It's as powerful as that. It's the ability to listen, not hear, but to listen. People will tell you things both overtly and inadvertently. And unless you have your ears open, I think the listening skill is hugely important. That's number 1. I think the second thing is reading, showing progression, showing that you're continually developing yourself. So one of the questions I'll often ask, and this isn't in a subterfuge way, but I'll often say, what are you reading at the moment? And so I love to hear, they're reading something. And this goes from teenage children, by the way, all the way through to colleagues as well, is reading something. And then the third thing is application. So how are you applying those 2 skills? So I would often ask and say, what have you learned, both clinically or administratively in the last three months that you've listened and heard about, and then how have you applied it? And they're the 3 skills. And I think if you apply that not just to your role, but also clinically as well, and oftentimes it's what's not said, and that's why the listening thing is so important. And you know this from practice, I'm sure as well, and it's the same with us. People will tell you what their burning issue is, but they may not tell you what is a secondary issue, which actually could be even more important. The reason that they're late for the appointment isn't that they were running late, it's that they didn't have access to petrol to get put in the car to get there, or the bus was late and they don't have a car, or whatever the case would be.
That's interesting you say that, because I have noticed that a lot of people who are leaders, they say they want to listen, so you'll tell them something and immediately they'll come in with the defensiveness and and this is why we did it, rather than oh, that's interesting. Okay, tell me more about why you think that, and getting really, really curious and digging down deep, because they think that their role is to defend and to explain. Actually, if you start doing that too early, it just makes things much, much worse, doesn't it? Actually, your role is to understand first. That's one of Stephen Covey's thing, isn't it? Seek first to understand in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It really makes a difference, because you can defend and explain later, but if someone feels that they've been heard and understood, then they're going to be more receptive. In fact, they won't hear you until they feel that you've understood them.
Yes, exactly. Reading skills and professional development would be number 2, and then applying them is really. And so you might say, well, how do I apply them? Give me an example, or is there something recently that you put in place that will do it, that will show that you've demonstrably learned from this? And again, I'll take I'm conscious of the people who are listening who may be clinicians, but again, I help out, I manage an oral surgery practice, and I work a tiny bit clinically there as well. But because we're in the private sector, we are dependent on referrals to come in. And this goes back to relationships with your fellow colleagues. And so general dentists will send stuff in, and we'll get the referrals in by post or by email, usually, or whatever the case may be. But contacting people, we live in a really busy 21st century. Your phone and my phone are pinging away. I'm sure once we switch them back on today, there'll be like a million emails and phone calls and texts and stuff like that. And so getting through the noise is an issue. So when patients are referred to oral surgery, oftentimes they are obviously in pain. They've had infection, there's infected wisdom teeth, things like that. And that's a great driver to attend. We all know this. And this is the kind of bread and butter dentistry. However, if they're left for a while and the infection has gone down and they're kind of well again, they're less inclined to come until the next bout of infection. So understanding how to make sure that they attend is really important. So I send out a very, very carefully worded text message. Initially, it started like, you've been referred, contact me for an appointment. Response rate, 40%. You've been referred by your dentist, contact me for an appointment, and the appointment is on next Tuesday. Again, about 40% success rate. And I did a bit of digging around this. And one of the things that I learned, and this is the listening thing, was patients said, I get so many scam texts, I didn't think it was true. So I then changed my text to, you have been recently referred by Dr. Rachel Morris on the 17th of April, 2025 to our practice here at blah, blah, blah. And we are setting up an appointment for you. And again, so the success rate went up. However, here's the kicker, and this is what I learned. I then added one line, and this has brought the response rate up to almost 100%. If you no longer require a text, no, other patients, many in discomfort, can use this clinical time. Now, that's what they call the poke that they can do. There's a great book, by the way, I'll mention one more, called Nudge by Cass Sustein. I'm sure you've read it, have you?
I've got a book called I've got one called Inside the Nudge Unit. So it's a very similar thing. And there's a really good podcast actually called Nudge by Phil Agnew or something like that. It's brilliant. It's a marketing podcast, but yes, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So nudge, and that's where I got the idea for that. And then
nudge series. So you're appealing to sort of altruism. They don't want other people to miss out there, do they? Yeah.
Yes, because they themselves had been in pain 2 or 3 weeks previously. And so they're saying, oh, that could be me. That could be my sister. That could be my brother. And so this goes back to the skill of listening, as understanding, reading around it, and then applying what you've learned.
Yeah. And that really is the skill of influence, isn't it? So once you've listened, you then need to be able to influence people. And if your manner is very combative or defensive or whatever, then you're not going to be able to influence, because something like a leader who can't take anyone along with them is just going on a walk or something. There's that saying, isn't there? But often you are leading, you're taking people with you, but in completely the wrong direction, because you've not actually thought about the fact that you're taking people with you. And maybe you've been moaning to all your colleagues about this, that, and the other, and you've not actually thought, perhaps this isn't helping our organisation. Perhaps this isn't helping me achieve what I need to achieve. So a lot of leaders in healthcare and teachers and lawyers, they are so busy delivering the day job. It's seeing the patients, teaching the lessons, that they have no time to actually think about that leadership role. And, I'm really keen on this aspect of thinking time, deep work or whatever, but how do you teach people to apply that sort of thing?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and that's really that if you were to say to me, what is the one cruncher about anything, is time, because we're all spinning plates madly, right? As we know, and I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so I've listened to many really good examples over the years. So I'm a big podcast fan, and I will listen to your podcast and others in the car, and I find that's great. So if you're commuting, if you're traveling, if you're doing that, don't forget your mental health. So get out for your walks. Sometimes you can have your headphones in if you're safe to walk when you can listen at the same time. It's carving that time out. I think that allowing yourself the time to progress, to read, to listen to podcasts, to develop yourself is as critical as showing up for work or cooking the dinner or making sure the house is clean. I would put them on an equal priority, because if you stand still, if you get stuck in the mud, you're not progressing, and ultimately it's going to both impact not just on your clinical outcomes and stuff, but also leadership capacity and how it affects your roles and responsibility on your organization. It's a domino effect all the way through. Everything is interconnected. Nothing stands by itself. How you do that, if you figure out how to absolutely get protected time, as they call it here in the public service, let me know. In the private sector, we are on the go the whole time. So what I tend to do, just as a practical example, I tend to get up early and go to bed early. Usually I have one night where I'm given a permission slip from the Home Office here to go out for lemonades with my friends. But I would say early Saturday morning, early Sunday morning is really great. So I make pancakes on a Sunday morning listening to podcasts. That's my little time to do that.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, lots of listeners tell me that they listen to the podcasts on dog walks or in the gym or on their commute. And people always say to me, Rachel, how do you have time to do all this reading and podcast listening? Well, first of all, I say, well, it's part of my job. I couldn't do this podcast if I wasn't doing it. And I don't have the clinical pressure that other people do. But if I'm in the car, I've got a podcast on. Or if I'm walking to work, which I do sometimes, I've got a podcast on. When I'm planting my plants, which that's my opposite world, I've got a podcast on. I'm just constantly listening. And then when the books are recommended on the podcast, I'll buy them if they sound good. I'll flick through them. I don't think to myself, I've got to read all of this book. So here's a quick tip for books. If you find the author often goes on some of the bigger podcasts of these sort of best-selling books. You listen to like an hour of podcast. You listen to it on 1.25. You get the whole book in about 45 minutes, and you just listen to it as an audio thing. So even if you've only got 10 minutes in the car, well, that's 4 journeys. You've listened to the whole book pretty much. The author's told everything that's in the book. Boom. You've read the book. So I think, there's hacks and things around it. A lot of people like audiobooks as well. A lot of people find audiobooks really, really good as well. So it's about being intentional, isn't it? About thinking, right, okay, what is it that I actually want to learn? What books have been recommended that are going to be good? Can I find the author on a podcast? Do I want the audiobook, or should I just sort of sit down and flick through it for an hour?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And, one of my pals recently said to me, he said, you should come with 1.25, by the way. If I could just, or is there also an option to skip trailer? And I said, okay, I'll skip trailer on this one. Just give you what you need,
Yeah. That's why we have YouTube Shorts. So that's why they can get stuff on YouTube Shorts. But I think walking is meditation. It really can be. And I think with all that advice to listen to podcasts all the time, I would also say you do need time when you're not listening to anything. So your brain just solves problems. I have my best ideas. Honestly, it's in the shower after my tennis lesson. I always come out going, I've got it. Bizarrely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's good. I think it just clears the head. And actually walking by yourself without the podcast on, and if you have the dogs or whatever the case may be, yes, absolutely.
So be intentional about being a leader. Find out what you need to do. Work on emotional intelligence. As Paul says, work on your listening. Really, really important. There's a great book by Nancy Klein, Time to Think, which is about how to create a listening environment. Now, if people want to find out more about you, about your work, about courses, where can they go?
Yeah, the best thing to do is actually just drop me a quick email. So Paul O'Dwyer at rcsi.com, it's Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. So that's very simple.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll speak again soon.
Thanks, Rachel.